Hello, here we are again on our second portion in the book of Genesis or Bereshit. This portion is called Noah, and we have covered the first 5 chapters last week with the creation of the world, the 7 days of creation. Then we had the fall of Adam and Eve as they disobey God's commandment not to eat from that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Then we have them going out of the Garden of Eden back into the land where they were brought up, where they were formed. And we see that Cain kills Abel. We talked about the responsibility of acknowledging when we do something wrong. We didn't see that repentance, at least it's not written by Adam and Eve or even Cain. We know what they said, and it was not, I'm sorry I did something wrong. I'm sorry I disobeyed you. Yes, I killed my brother. Well, I don't know that he knew what killing was. But I took the life of, the word killing. I took the life of my brother. And and we see that it just got worse and worse. And we end the portion by saying that there was violence in the land. There was Hamas. That's the word for violence. And we start this chapter 6, and we're going to cover today again 5 chapters. So I obviously cannot cover everything and do justice what's everything that's written there, because there's so much there. But one thing that I do want to highlight, and I'm taking this from Rabbi Foreman. He has this program that it's called Aleph Beta Academy, and it is animated with short videos, and I just love it. I learned a lot from him. And then he has what he called, and I'm going to share with you my screen. He called it rebirth, the recreation. I called it rebirth. And the reason why I'm doing that is because we see that, I'm going to hide this panel. Okay, there you go. We're going to see how on Genesis 1, God creates the first 6 days of the world, where it ends on the 6th day. If you remember, he created man and beast, right? Then 7th day was Shabbat, the day of rest. So when we see actually on chapter 7 is when we're going to get the flood, where the land will again have another rest, and we will start chapter 8 on Genesis 8, and it's really a rebirth of the world and mankind. This time with 8 people, which is really interesting because 8 is the number for new beginnings. So here we're starting again on chapter 8 with a new earth, so to speak. And then we're going to go over the similarities on those two. But one of the things, and then on day 7th is what I wanted to say, that in between those two, we have rest. So our Father who always restores, he has in this first 2,000 years between Adam and Noah, we see how he created the earth perfect, beautiful, and then what man brought it into by disobeying the instructions, because the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, are called the Torah, and the Torah just means instructions. So he left us instructions, kind of like the manual right? When you buy something, you have a manual that tells you how to use it so that you don't break it and that you use it properly. Well, our Father created this world and left us instructions of how to use it and how to live in it, how to treat each other. So we see in those first 2,000 years what happens. And then Father decides this is enough. Evil cannot continue to grow this much. There is always a cap to it, that it will go no further. And he decides to recreate or rebirth. And we see in our lives, we have a first birth when we come out of the womb. We come through water, just like Noah in the ark, they came through water. And then we have a spiritual birth. There comes an age where we understand and our eyes are open to a reality that was not understood before. The first few years of our lives, it's very much lived in our basal or our survival mode, where we want to eat, we want to sleep, we want to play. And that is all that really rules our lives. We cry when we're hungry or we're dirty or we need comfort, or we're cold or we're hot, we're uncomfortable, whatever it is, a baby just cries. And all it needs is give me what I need. That's all that rules his life, because it's growing. The baby's growing and needs that to sustain life. That's why it's called a survival mode or survival part of the development of our brain. But then you're able to reason with your child. The child starts understanding things, asking questions beyond why can't I do that, or why can't I eat that, but where does the sun go when it gets dark? Why do you see the moon at night and I don't see the sun anymore? The kids start asking questions that they don't understand what happens. They don't understand how the world works. So that is there is an age of reasoning, and at that point our Father opens our eyes to see that spiritual side of us, and we are born again. We realize there is more to it than just eating and drinking and sleeping and having fun. There is more to life than that. So we have that second rebirth, and we see that at that point he starts the new creation with we're going to see the parallelism between the two. Okay, so in Genesis 1, on day 1, we see that he formed the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the earth, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And that movement of hovering over it is the same that we see in Genesis 8, when God sends a wind to blow over the earth and the water starts subsided, so that that wind starts moving the waters to go back. They go back. They are restrained from the heavens, and they are returning to the depth of the earth. That word spirit is the same word as wind, or is the same word as breath. Then on day 2, we see that God made the expanse or the sky. He separated the waters, the upper waters from the lower waters. And we see now in Genesis 8 that the fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens are closed, so that those waters that were open, those windows that were open, and water pour from the upper waters, and water came out from the deeper waters, the lower waters, then those were the ones that created the flood. They are closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained. So we see that happening again. Then we have on day 3, that God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. Let the earth sprout vegetation, yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit in which is their seed. So then we have on on the 8th chapter that the dove, well, they said he sends first the raven, and the raven go back and forth until the earth actually dried up. So the dove is sent out 3 times, and she comes back in the evening on that 3rd time, and she has, it says, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth, because obviously the trees were not underwater. And to me, that's interesting. Day 3 is the day of resurrection. We know that from our Messiah. He resurrects on the 3rd day. We see that life springs up or sprouts vegetation, yielding seeds and fruit on that 3rd day. And also, we see that on he sends out 3 times the dove, and he sends it out in every seven days, like every week. He sends it out and comes back, sends it out and comes back. And when you multiply 7 times 3, you get 21, which is the amount of time that we need to get rid of a toxic thought and replace it by a healthy thought, or the birth of new neurons, which represents that thought in our brain. And so here we have on day 3, life is happening and in the earth. So then on day 4, it says, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day and the night, and let them be signs and for seasons, for the days and years. And we see that they, the sun, the moon, and the stars didn't really suffer any changes. They didn't get destroyed. They were not covered by water. So, but we do see that there is a change in the seasons. He says, and as long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. So I said that wrong. There is not a change. On day 4 is the day of authority and government. So when he set up those signs in the sky for us to know what are the seasons, he is just reiterated that day and night will never cease, and there will be harvest, and there will be summer and winter. So the seasons stay. So that is, to me, it reminds me that on day 4 is the government and the authority of God, and he is still sitting on the throne. On day 5, we see that let the waters teem with living creatures, and let the bird fly above the earth in the open sky, in the expanse of the sky. And we know that obviously the fish never suffer. They were still in the water, but the birds, only the ones that were in the ark were the ones that survived, because those that were outside didn't have a place to land. They were inside for 5 months. And that's another thing that I think it's interesting, that that day 5 represents, number 5 represents grace. And we know that like John's mother, she goes by herself for 5 months. She stays, she withdraws from the public. She just goes into her home and stays away from everyone for 5 months. We know that the Noah's Ark stays in the water for 5 months. So there is something about that. 5 represents the power of God, represents grace represents his goodness, his mercy. And we see that the dove actually returns back with that olive leaf in her beak. And Noah knew that the waters had receded from the earth. And then on day 6, we know that God created first the living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, land crawlers, beasts of the earth according to their kind. And then on day 6, and created man. And on day 6, coming out of the ark, you have Noah and his wife with their sons and their wives. So, and all the living creatures that had come in, birds, livestock, and everything that crawls upon the earth, so that they can spread out over the earth and be fruitful and multiply. So we see that rebirth of the world, because we have a father that doesn't say, well, this got really bad. And yep, everything got really violent. And I don't know what else to do. I don't know what to do here. He has a plan for everything. Could if he just got rid of everything and never bring it back? Of course he could. It's his world. He could have done whatever he wanted to. He didn't have to save 8 people. He didn't have to tell them how to bake an ark. But he does, because, like I said before, that's a microcosm of what's going to happen later to us. And many times we do that with our children, don't we? As parents, we tell them, okay, this is what happened to me. I don't know if you're going to do the same thing, but if you do, these are going to be the consequences. You more likely are going to go, something like it happened to me may happen to you. So God leaves us examples so we know, I'm giving you this earth and I'm giving you everything you need. But if you're not going to live according to the best for you, I can't let you destroy yourself and destroy everybody else, destroy the world in the process. So that is something that we do in our homes with our own children. We don't just let them go into the kitchen and turn on the stove and go in the bathroom and turn on the bathtub and open the drawers and play with the knives. And if we have scissors, grab the scissors and cut. Well, they cut a lot of things, sometimes their hair. So, we are very careful with them. We just don't let them do whatever they want. And it's the same thing that our Father, he is constantly showing us in our own lives how he cares for us and why he stopped things and why he does the things that he does. One of the things that it's really interesting to me is that when he's mentioning, you're going to do this and that about the ark, how to prepare the ark, one of the things that he says is you're going to leave a window that is going to be a cubit, or that is 18 inches. That from the top of the ark, there's going to be that window. And 18 in Hebrew is high, and high is the number 18, and is represented by the number 18, and it means life. So he's saying, if you look up, because that ark had 3, which is really interesting too. It had 3 decks. And we see that in ourselves, in the way our brain works. We have that basal, that survival mode. Then we have the limbic, where all our emotions are. And then we have the executive brain function. That's where we think when we solve problems. And we see that those 3 levels of that deck in the ark. And then, but he says, when you go up, on the top, right before the end of the ark, you're going to leave a window, and that window represents life. He said 18 inches. He could have made it any other. That ark was huge, by the way, and he just leaves a small little window. He could have had, a bigger one, a smaller one, but he uses the word 18. He's telling us that, because obviously to us 18 is 18, but when they see 18 in Hebrew, they are reading high, they're reading life. So it's really interesting that That is like a symbolic gift that you give to somebody in their birthday. You can give them $18 or anything in multiples of 8 that would be multiples of 18 if you want to give more money, but is because you're offering life to that person. So that meant a lot from a Hebrew mindset. So, and what do we have when we look at that? You have to look up to that window, right? If you have in a big building with arc with 3 decks, and that is right 18 inches right before the top of that arc, you have to look up. 1, 2, the difference between us and the animals is we speak. We can pray. When we look up, we pray. We ask God for the things that we need. And another thing that we know from that cubit is the ark, the altar of incense that was right before the Holy of Holies, is where it says in Revelation where our prayers are being held. There is an altar of incense. That incense goes up to heaven, and those are our prayers that he smell as pleasing aroma to him. And he tells us to pray without ceasing. He desires for that incense, not just that he can smell it, but that permeate our atmosphere. Because it does change us. Prayer changes. God already has a will, and he is forming his will in us, and he is making us into his image. He is teaching us. He's training us, just like we do with our children. And he desires for those prayers to change us, to change our heart. So we go from there are so many things that we can draw out of that. One of the things that was really interesting to me too is that oh goodness, I am, let's see how long this, actually I have low battery. I forgot to connect it to the power, but okay, one of the things that was really amazing to me was the raining, that it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. And of course, you're reading for the first time the Bible. Let's say you've never read the rest and you're just starting from the beginning and you read 40 days and 40 nights. Okay, interesting. And then you would see that repeat again and again. We know that Moses went up and brought down the word of God. And he went up for 40 days and 40 nights the first time, and he came back. Then he goes a second time, 40 days and 40 nights, and gets the second tablets because he broke the first one. And we'll talk more about that when we get to that part in Exodus. But when we see that, we realize, here we go again. Why does why things happen twice? Like, we know Messiah came already and he died on the cross and he left. And he said, I will not leave you orphans. He will leave his Holy Spirit to guide us, just like that hovering spirit over the waters in the first creation, just that wind of God, that breath of God that made those waters recede in the rebirth in Noah of the world again. And we have Messiah coming again. So then you have from the first time that 40 days and 40 nights is mentioned in the Bible is in Noah. And then you have all the way to in the New Testament, or Brit Hadashah, the renew covenant, we have the last time we hear again, 40 days and 40 nights is Messiah. Yeshua is being tempted in the desert. So we see how Noah and his family is also seeing the rain come in for 40 days and 40 nights, and they are being tested during the time. They've never seen that before. They don't know what's going to happen. All we know is that they probably thought that they were going to die too, even though God said not. But you doubt when you don't know what's going to happen. And but then, they're there for 5 months. We see God's grace again. So here we go, all the way to the end, and we see our Messiah being tempted for 40 days and 40 nights. And we see how he faces the temptations that Satan brings to him, trying to make him do a miracle just to get some bread in the desert because he was not eating, or because he was hungry, or make him throw himself and from a height because the angels can come and get him. Test God to see if he will send his angels and take care of you and save you, or bow and I'll give you everything, just worship me, etc. So we see that the earth is being, again, from one end to the other. We see those things being repeated because God's life, the way we see it linear. You're born, you live, you die. Well, that's not the way the Bible is written. That's not how the Hebrew mindset is either. It's all cyclical. Just like that bird went out 3 times. It went and came back. It went and came back every 7 days. Why does he do that? He could have sent it out every 3 days. He could have sent it out every 9th day. No, God doesn't do anything without a purpose. There is a reason for everything, and he's leaving us little morsels of bread so that we can follow the trail and say, he's telling me something. He's taking me somewhere. There is something he wants me to see. And that's, if we can see scriptures from that perspective, we're going to find incredible nuggets of treasures that are there for us to find. Maybe can I ask you a favor? I need the plug, if you don't mind. Thank you. I'm so glad my hubby came in. Okay, so then we go on chapter 7. All that is in chapter 6. And in 7, we also see, actually, chapter 8 was the recreation, right? So thank you, babe. So here we are in chapter 7. I wanted to mention the importance of that ark. That word ark, and I am going to close this. That word ark is a word that is the same word used in Moses when he was put in that basket. Is the same word for that basket, is the same as ark. So we see that in God puts Noah and his family into an ark, just like God put Moses into a basket so that he would survive the flood. And the flood, the being thrown into the river Nile, like all the other babies that were drowned. So his mother put him in that basket. In that basket, she actually put tar inside and out, just like the Noah's Ark. He told them, you put tar in inside and out to protect it from the water coming in. So there is a lot of words being repeated the same in both events. And in the first one, 8 are saved. That starts a new, the humanity again. And then we see in the second one, Moses is the one actually that helps them leave Egypt. God uses him to free his people from Egypt and start a new nation. So there's a lot of parallelisms there too. So then we go into the chapter 9, which is the curse of Canaan. And if you look into that, there is all kinds of understandings of what did it mean that Ham, so Noah had 3 children, Shem, Ham, and Japhet. And Ham, the second one, goes into his tent and see his father after they have come out of the ark, and he had planted a vineyard, and he drank too much. Some say that he didn't drink too much. Some say that because the atmosphere was different than that alcohol that he was used to before. Because remember, we had a canopy of water before that shielded us from the earth, from the sun. So shielded the earth from the sun. And that's why everything was bigger. We had dinosaurs and all that. Well, when that heaven of water came down with the rain, it changed the atmosphere in the earth. And so they say that he probably didn't drink as much, but the whatever he was used to drinking affected him differently now, because he's never been in an earth with an atmosphere like that. One way or another, his Ham sees him and goes and tells his brothers. We know that his brothers come and they walk backwards with something to cover, a robe, a blanket to cover their father, and they cover their father without seeing him. And there are all kinds of explanations of whether he saw him naked, if they saw his mother naked, or they saw them naked. It really doesn't, there are different interpretations for what is written there. And I really don't want to go into that. But what I really wanted to point out, and it came to my mind as I'm listening to this, one more time, it's like every time you go around the scriptures, our Father just reveals something new. And what he reveals to me this time is what we see. And it is important that we remember that whatever happens in the relationship, in the nakedness of someone, whether it is he was by himself or he was with his wife, they were in a tent. They were in a private place, and that needs to stay that way. We don't need to go into somebody's private chambers, their bedroom, or any other place to and then expose it to others. And what comes to my mind is movies. We watch things in, sex in movies. It is ridiculous. Now, it used to be for rated R movies. Well, you see now sex scenes for PG-13, and that is ridiculous. That those kids don't need to be shown that. Nobody needs to be shown that. Actually, I don't like to see it. When they come up, my husband and I, we just look the other way and we fast forward, because those people, even if they show like they're married in the movie, they're not really married. And everybody, they have a cloud of witness around them, filming them and telling them what to do. And that shouldn't be. That shouldn't be. We need to protect our eyes, and we need to protect them. I believe that the Father really wants us to cover those things and leave them in the tent where they need to be, not out, expose them out for others to see and for others to know. I'm just going to leave it there. Okay, so then we go from there to the Tower of Babel. And in the Tower of Babel, what I wanted to point out was, it is a very short part. It just says they all had one language, and they wanted to have, they decided, they were all in one accord, that they wanted to have built this tower so that they can create a name for themselves. And I don't believe that our Father really wanted that. Who does? Like when I marry my husband, he doesn't want me to have a different last name than his. He would like me to take on his last name. And I'm from Venezuela, and in most Hispanic countries, we keep our father's name, like I'm Simonette Sanchez, but then I'll have a DE, de, which means of, Chirapanov. So that means that I'm Simonette Sanchez. I have my identity. I have a father, but I belong to Cherepanov. And it is a beautiful thing, I believe, that the wife would do that, would take on the family name, because now we become the Cherepanovs and our children are Cherepanov. And that's the way every family should be. So I believe that when they did that, and God actually said, because they have done this and they are all in one accord, nothing will stop them. So how much more powerful can we be when we are all in one accord and we all take the name of our Father, and by that name we proclaim that we are his children and that he created this world to bring light to everyone, and he wants to restore everything that we have broken, everything that we have destroyed, everything that we have soiled, and he wants to make it new. And in the meantime, we are here as ambassadors to tell others that he's a good father, that he loves us, and he has a good plan for this world and for all of us in it. So that word Babel means confusion. What God did, what he confused the languages, and people couldn't communicate anymore. There are let me tell you, there's so many things that are incredible, how they are different from language to language, and you can create incredible fights and problems just by using the wrong word. A correct word in my language could be a wrong word in another language, and that person thinks I am insulting them. And I didn't do that in my language, but that's how the confusion happened. And then those that understood each other, that kept the same language, then they grouped and they dispersed throughout the world. And we have all the different nations now because of that. It's really neat how we see in the book of Acts, we'll study that later on too, when he restores, everybody's speaking one language, even though it says that everybody was speaking in different language and they were all praising God together. So, and they were speaking in an unknown tongue. And I believe one day we are all, that he says, actually, the prophet says in scripture, that one day we will all have one tongue again. So that is a little bit of what happened there with the tower. And the other thing that I wanted to bring about too was that when God creates altars, well, when man creates altars to worship God, he asked us to do it with rocks, with stones, and never to chisel them or cut in them, because like when he wanted the temple to be built, because we use his creation and we leave it as it is. We work with it, we pick the right one, but it is to him as unadulterated as we can give to him our worship. Well, what they were doing with this bricks were baked bricks that they wanted to make. They wanted to make them and put them through fire. Well, unfortunately, we have done that with religion. We have baked our own theologies, and in our own, we have fashioned them however we want it, and we offer it to God as worship. Well, that is what we think he wants, but it's not what he has asked. So that just reminds me of that. When we want to worship, he actually says, don't worship me like the people around you worship their gods. Don't imitate them. Don't bring that in my sanctuary. Don't bring that to me, because it's kind of like me having a boyfriend, and then when I come home, I want to bring to my husband what my boyfriend gave me. No, that's wrong. First of all, I shouldn't have a boyfriend. We shouldn't have other gods but him. One, that's adultery. Two, whatever I do outside the home, that is wrong, don't bring it inside the house and try to make it right and say, well, at least this is for you. I just love you. So I make it. No, that is wrong. What starts wrong ends wrong. So don't do that. That doesn't please our Father. And it will bring a lot of pain to us because, again, we're disobeying what he says. So to bake bricks and put them through fire, trying to make it holy somehow, no amount of fire is going to make anything that we do out of his will or against his will to be pure. Don't even try. It's not going to happen. Okay. So that's what happened in the Tower of Babel. Then we have the genealogy from Shem to Abraham. And we have about 10 patriarchs from Adam to Noah. And then we're going to have we're going to see the different genealogies from Abraham. It goes all the way to Abram so that we can see how the nation starts with him. So that was a lot. And I hope you enjoy that. I hope that it brought some clarity in some things. I know I probably muddied the waters in other places, but leave some comments underneath, and we'll continue the conversation. Have a great Shabbat.